Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production, Cymbal Series Day. Today, we are diving into fun, alternative, exciting, unexpected uses for an X-hat attachment. Once upon a time, I know for me at least, I was excited about having multiple hi-hats in my setup, and I definitely got a little X-hat attachment, and I definitely used it a lot, and then as I got into other music, I started using it less and less, became kind of a one hi-hat person, but every now and then we have a piece of gear like that in our pile that maybe has some other things it can do that aren't the original intended purpose, and this is one of my favorite things like that we've come upon here. Recently, we did an episode about lots of different kinds of stacks, and this is sort of an extension of that idea. This is what we sort of think of as an adjustable stack. Normally, we're just tensioning two cymbals together to make our stack, or three or four, or however many you want. But this, with a clutch and an X-hat attachment, gives us the opportunity to adjust the pressure between the cymbals and get into a whole different realm of possibilities. Some artists I've seen over the last 20 years, and probably earlier than that, have experimented with ideas like this. Billy Ward comes to mind, some other people as well, with the idea of also not just using an X-hat for different purposes, but also marrying together cymbals that aren't even the same diameter, in some cases like we're doing today, significantly different diameters to get us the behavior that we want out of the pair. Now, before we do any of that, we should definitely hear the cymbal, the top cymbal in question on its own. Today, for the primary or top cymbal, we're using a 20-inch Zildjian K Constantinople medium-thin high ride cymbal. We chose this one because it is a jazzy, kind of nice warm sound that's crashable. It's got a little bit more weight on it than some of the other ride cymbals that we use here, so it marries really well with something else underneath to kind of make them work together and do something cool. For today's experiment, we're going to put underneath this a 12-inch K Prototype hi-hat. You can really use whatever you want under there. We've tried out splashes and different things, and we're mainly looking for a diameter and a weight for the bottom cymbal that's giving us the response we're looking for. Now, this is where the usage of the X-hat becomes the whole thing that it is. By using this piece of apparatus, we can do a lot of different subtle adjustments to get different behaviors out of the pair of cymbals. The first thing to notice is that we can use the clutch to see, different amounts of pressure, different amounts of distance, what those will do to the interaction of the cymbals. And then secondarily, just like a regular hi-hat stand, we can tip the bottom one with a little screw underneath so that if we want just a little bit of contact but a little more of an angle like that rather than kissed up really flush, there's just so many options here. Additionally, you can also adjust the tension of the clutch on the top cymbal the same as you would with a hi-hat, which does also affect the overall response of them and affects the feel even more. Do, however, keep in mind that depending on the clutch you're using, there may be threading where it passes through the cymbal, and this can, over time, cause a little bit of damage to the hole in the center of the cymbal. So if you can get your hands on a clutch that doesn't have any threading, or if it does, just bear that in mind in terms of how much time you spend using this kind of setup. All right, let's hear this at sort of a medium tension, kind of where we started out with it today. Now with this sort of amount of pressure between the two of them and this amount of contact, it gives us somewhere in between a sort of ride or crash cymbal and semi-closed hi-hats. But because they're not both 20-inch cymbals, we get better response because there's just not that much weight involved. What this also means is that when we crash into the ride cymbal on the top, that smaller cymbal is going to react a lot, but overall the sustain is not going to change that much. It's still behaving largely like it did before when the cymbal was totally by itself. But there's a little bit of gating, a little bit of interaction, and a whole lot of sizzle between the two that sounds really cool. Let's hear this a little bit more in a different context. This kind of setup is one of those scenarios where you can use it for inspiration to take you out of your comfort zone, or you can use it in your kind of standard situation as a new sound to push that music in a different direction. This gives us things that are a little bit hi-hat reminiscent, also a little bit cymbal sizzle reminiscent. It can be jazzy, it can be rocky, it could just be a crash or a shorter accent that doesn't go all the way to a traditional kind of stack sort of sound, but also isn't just a plain crash or crash ride sound. There is also some volume overall that is diminished in terms of the sustain and a much more pronounced attack, even with this limited amount of contact between the two cymbals, that can lend itself to faster playing and shorter kind of crash accents in between the patterns. Additionally, the bell is still quite functional at this tension between the two cymbals, which is really nice to have as well if you want to do sort of more traditional ride stuff in between the bell and the body of the cymbal. Alright, now we're going to press the cymbals a little bit tighter together, get a little bit more of a punchier, cleaner, drier sound. Let's see what that does. Now we're starting to get into more of a stack or a hi-hat kind of sound, or like an alternate kind of hi-hat sound, but because again we're using mismatched cymbals that are not the same size or the same weight or the same series, maybe not even the same brand in some cases, there's a lot of possibilities here that don't take us all the way out of the realm of drum set sounds, but still are a surprise and sort of a delight to the ear as you move from the regular hi-hat over to this other sound. This kind of sound even more so lends it to quick, fast, kind of articulate playing, linear stuff, and also very short crash sounds, which can be really nice for that kind of playing as well. Depending on the two cymbals that you use, or if you have one on the top part that you're striking that you like and just kind of move through a few other options underneath, there's a lot of possibilities with any pair, similarly to mixing hi-hats. And you can even use a broken cymbal, a cracked cymbal, really anything you want underneath, because what we're really after here is just some kind of metallic contact underneath the primary cymbal to change up its sound and feel and give us a new sort of behavior there. Let's hear a little bit more of the super staccato version. Now, things to be aware of when you're cinching them down this tight, similar to any other kind of stack situation, if you're playing very, very hard, very aggressively, there's possibility of damage that could happen depending on which cymbals you're using and just how tight they are together. It kind of comes with the territory with stacking cymbals in general, so it's worth noting that if you're going to go very tight, just be careful, pay attention to how you're playing them, make sure you're not getting on the edge too hard. Just bear those things in mind. Another thing that we noticed today just in the course of our experimentation is that the angle that the clutch is mounted, specifically where the wing nut is, does come into play if you're going to play on the bell of the cymbal, because you could end up playing the wing nut instead. It gets in the way a little bit, so it's worth noting that if you're doing this and you want to use the bell, make sure that the wing nut is facing away from you. Now for a third option, we wanted to figure out just how small of an interaction we could get between the two cymbals. Almost a situation where you might not, under medium or light playing, hear the secondary cymbal underneath contacting the primary cymbal. But then when you get into it harder, or if you give it a good crash, they start to meet. This is sounding more similar to a rattler or rivets in the primary cymbal, which again, this is handy because we didn't have to buy a rattler, we didn't have to drill holes and put rivets in the cymbal, and depending on what we put underneath this, we can vary that up a lot without having to get too invasive on the setup. This is super fun for shuffle grooves. This is super fun for jazz things. This could be a good option for if you're playing alternate implements, brushes and broomsticks and things like that. It's very subtle. It's a very kind of pleasant sound, and it doesn't overwhelm the main sound of the main cymbal. It's much closer to what we had before we put anything underneath it. This is also a situation where the tilter on the bottom cymbal can come into play depending on how much interaction you want to have under the light playing. We can tip that bottom cymbal more drastically to have it touch all the time, or we can flatten it out more evenly so that it only interacts when you really get into the top. For the purposes of today's demonstration, we utilize this setup in a primary ride location. We're playing it that way. This could be put anywhere on the kit. It could be to the left, to the right. It could be just about anywhere, and depending on what you're using for the primary cymbal on top, it could live as more of a crash, or if you're using smaller ones, it could be more of just an accent cymbal. The world is wide open as far as this goes, and between the weights, the sizes, the possibility of using leftover broken stuff or cheap cymbals that are knocking around, it's kind of a bottomless pit of opportunities to just get into something slightly left of center, but that's not so different that it wouldn't fit into a lot of musical contexts. That about wraps it up for today. I hope you enjoyed coming along with us on this experiment. This is one of those situations that kind of exists in a lot of spaces in the gear community of the drum set here, where we look at a thing like an X-Hat and imagine that it's got a name and that's the thing that it does. This can do a lot more than that. They're fairly common, they're fairly easy to get, and getting us past the idea of traditional stacks or the idea that we're just making an extra hi-hat for when we're playing our double bass pedal or something like that can take us to new possibilities. We love possibilities, we love multiple uses for things. Always make sure that you're exploring your gear, whatever you have, to the fullest extent, and if something like this is starting to appeal to you, there's always more than just the one thing it says it does on the box.